Ricky, your gamer tag is Dark Boop, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
What's a boop?
The events of this video can best be described using just one word: shocking. But before we get down to the nitty-gritty, we need to start 9 years earlier. In 2002, ex-Marine Doug Stewart went on a blind date with a woman named Venus McComb. They rushed to the altar and were married 4 days later. In no time, they had kids together. Since Venus was the breadwinner between the two, she had little time for the kids. Because of this, she urged Doug to find a better job, but he disregarded her requests and spent most of his time playing Xbox. These issues escalated throughout 2009 after the family moved to Newport News, Virginia. Venus then decided that enough was enough. In February of 2010, she up and left with the kids and moved back to her parents' home in Colon, Michigan, leaving Doug and the apartment in Newport News. 2 months later, on April 26, 2010, a 911 call was received by the Colon Police Department. The caller was Venus's father, Larry McComb.
She's just not there? I mean,
Yeah,
is there
she's
a
not
vehicle
here.
missing or anything?
The vehicle is here, her kids are here, and she is gone.
Okay. Have you tried calling her or anything?
Yeah, we can't get hold of her.
The last time Venus's mother saw her was at 6 a.m. while leaving for work from their Michigan home. Venus was dressed in a gray shirt, pajama bottoms, and brown Crocs. 2 hours later, Larry was awoken by his rambunctious grandkids making noise in the living room. He quickly realized that they were unsupervised and that Venus was missing. He urgently dialed 911. Michigan State Trooper Aaron Steensma promptly arrived at the residence. His initial observations painted a disconcerting picture. The gravel in the driveway had been disrupted, as if a struggle had taken place. And on the tank beside the driveway was a footprint, presumed to be Venus's. Also, on the ground was a pink hair tie and the plastic wrapping for a blue 8x10 tarp from Walmart. This wrapper had a fingerprint on it, which was sent in for testing. Through questioning Venus's parents, Steensma learned about Venus and Doug's tumultuous relationship, which recently culminated with Venus winning custody of their children. Since Doug lost the custody battle, detectives were concerned that he may have been involved in Venus's disappearance. So naturally, they were eager to speak with him. They were able to reach him via cell phone later that night. They asked about his whereabouts earlier that day, and Doug said that he was in Virginia running errands. One of these errands was dropping by Wilson & Wilson, his attorney's office, to make a payment early in the morning. Sure enough, authorities spoke with the secretary and another employee at Wilson & Wilson, and they confirmed that Doug had come in to make a cash payment that morning. They even described Doug's appearance, which was later confirmed with surveillance footage from Doug's apartment building. He was wearing a baseball cap, a hoodie, and sunglasses. This placed Doug 11 hours away from where Venus disappeared in Michigan. It seemed that Doug had a solid alibi, but police weren't ruling him out just yet. They applied for a search warrant of Doug's apartment and truck, and while they waited for the green light, a different search was taking place in Michigan.
A search continues tonight for a Colon Township woman missing for 2 days now.
News had broke about Venus's disappearance, and dozens of volunteers, along with a helicopter and search dogs, spent hours upon hours assisting in the search efforts.
Investigators searched for hours today looking for any sign of Venus Stewart. Acres upon acres of fields, briars, overgrowth, and scorching heat.
It's very thick, briars. It's very hot in there. There's no wind in there. Right where those guys are at.
Dozens searched all day for any sign of Venus Stewart.
While the search took place, Venus's parents were left in shambles, only able to guess what may have happened to their daughter.
It's numbing. You go from numbness to hysteria.
Around 7 Monday morning, the McCombs' daughter, Venus Stewart, vanished. Venus was staying with her parents after leaving her husband in Virginia. Her father says he immediately noticed what looked like the remnants of a scuffle in the gravel of his otherwise perfect yard.
You can see there's a footprint or two, and my daughter's footprint was up on the tank here.
Police located Venus's estranged husband, Douglas Stewart, in Virginia, but didn't find Venus. Missing for 3 days leaves her parents fearing the worst.
So they figure he parked his car there, he snuck behind the wood pile and waited for her, and when she came out to put the mail in the mailbox, he grabbed her. She didn't make it to the house.
She was the best mommy in the world. And I know she would never leave on her own. There's no way she would ever leave on her own.
Her parents were convinced that Doug was responsible for Venus's disappearance. The spotlight on Doug was coming from all angles, and to make things worse, the media even dug up this police report from 2008.
24-hour News 8 obtained court documents that detail the couple's tumultuous relationship. In 2008, Venus requested a personal protection order saying, quote, "I am scared to death. Every day I live in constant fear. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when he will appear again."
And 7 days after this discovery, a letter from Venus was found hidden in a drawer.
Tensions mounting as a note left behind by Venus Stewart is discovered in her home. That paper containing disturbing details of abuse.
Detailing allegations of molestation against Doug Stewart, Venus's estranged husband, involving one of their daughters.
Doug could not catch a break. Not only were the police honing in on him as a suspect, but his image in the court of public opinion was looking rough. And to top it all off, Doug was simultaneously fighting to regain the custody of his children, who were in the temporary care of Venus's parents as a custody battle ensued.
Oh, we're just horrified, you know.
Doug Stewart, Venus's estranged husband, now in the midst of a legal snarl, attempting to gain custody of his kids. On the phone with her father, Larry, he tells us before Venus disappeared, she was afraid.
Now, Venus was so scared that when she came back to Michigan, she took out a will 3 weeks before she was abducted. And it said in her will that if anything happened to her, she wanted the children to go to me and my wife.
The McCombs say they're hiding the children for their safety. Larry tells us a custody hearing is scheduled for May 24th and that the kids and Venus will have representation from the state.
Come on, Doug, where is she? Where's Venus? Come on, Doug. Yeah, you're a disgrace to the Marines, buddy. Yes, you are. Sure.
Sneers and jabs from a riled-up crowd tonight, their anger directed at Doug Stewart, the only person of interest in his wife Venus's disappearance. Stewart in court today for a custody hearing involving their 2 children.
Pray for Venus!
Protesters clutching signs, a backlash against the possibility of Doug Stewart gaining custody of his kids.
We want the public to be aware that we do not want Doug to have those children.
A Child Protective Services worker took the stand and answered questions, citing concerns with placing the children in Doug's care following allegations from one of the girls of inappropriate sexual contact, even though charges were never filed in connection with those allegations.
A final decision was not met during this hearing, so the children would continue to be in the care of Venus's parents.
Relieved. I feel real relieved. That's about all I have to say.
Although her parents won this battle, the war raged on and another custody hearing was scheduled for a few weeks later. Despite being accused of murdering his wife and potentially losing custody of his kids, Doug maintained an innocent demeanor, as portrayed in this phone interview.
Now that the timeline has gone so far, I'm getting very worried and very concerned. I don't know what is next, to be honest with you. I'll just keep watching the news and pray and hope for the best. I don't know. I pray for my children every night. I pray for their mother, and I pray for the McComb family that they get some truth on this and we can figure out where Venus is.
At this point, the search warrant for Doug's apartment and truck had been approved, so the detectives showed up at Doug's residence in Virginia. Doug was as cooperative as can be. Unfortunately, there was no sign of Venus in the apartment. However, when searching his mess of a truck, they discovered a Walmart receipt for the purchase of a shovel, a pair of gloves, a cap, and an 8x10 tarp, the counterpart for the plastic wrapper found in Venus's parents' driveway. The receipt was from a Walmart in Van Wert, Ohio, which happens to be en route between Newport News, Virginia, and Colon, Michigan. The date was smudged, but investigators were able to find the purchase in the Van Wert Walmart's transaction records. They determined that the purchase took place the evening before Venus's disappearance. This seemed like a huge breakthrough, but how could it be significant if the secretaries and surveillance footage confirmed that Doug was in Virginia at the time of the disappearance? The detectives had a theory that someone had posed as Doug, dropping off the envelope of money in a disguise, while the real Doug committed the crime in Michigan. As far-fetched as it seemed, investigators refused to leave any stone unturned. They went back to Wilson & Wilson to question the staff once again. This time, they described Doug in more detail. He was wearing a baseball cap, a hoodie with the hood pulled up, and large aviator sunglasses. A concealing outfit like this typically isn't a fashion statement, but rather a strategic way to prevent others from identifying you. And if that was this man's intention, it worked. Neither of the Wilson & Wilson employees could say with 100% certainty whether it was Doug or someone posing as Doug. If this really wasn't Doug, and instead was someone posing as him, That meant that Doug had an accomplice. And if there was an accomplice, Doug would have had to communicate with them somehow. So detectives started looking into Doug's cell phone records. 4 days prior to Venus's disappearance, Doug was making a suspicious amount of calls, between 7 to 15 a day, to one phone number in particular. Then, there is a gap in the records indicating that Doug's phone was turned off on the night before Venus disappeared and turned back on the following night. As soon as the phone was turned on, more calls were made to the same suspicious phone number. Authorities were quickly able to trace this number to a 20-year-old student from Bear, Delaware, named Ricky Spencer. Authorities were struggling to understand why a 29-year-old ex-military man was making so many calls to a young college kid from Delaware. So, investigators went to Delaware to question the kid himself.
How do you know Doug Stewart?
Through Xbox Live.
Through Xbox Live?
Ricky explained that for the past year and a half, he and Doug had been virtual best friends, playing online shooters together day in and day out. And on one occasion, Doug even invited Ricky to stay over at his house during his spring break. Ricky agreed, and the two met in person for the first time on April 1st, 2010.
We were trying to go to the clubs, but I'm 21 yet, so...
Oh, you're not 21 yet?
No.
Okay.
And then we played Xbox. I mean, he was a chill guy, but it was just awkward, you know?
Yeah.
Because he's like close to his 30s, and I'm like in my 20s.
Right. When's the last time you saw him?
My spring break, it might be in the beginning of April.
Okay.
Based on Ricky's phone records, detectives figured that this was a lie. The morning before Venus's disappearance, Ricky was in Delaware, where he turned off his phone directly after a call with Doug. Then, the next morning, he briefly turned his phone back on, pinging a phone tower just north of Doug's apartment. He then turned his phone back off. The next time his phone was powered on, he was back at his home in Delaware. As the interview continued, Ricky recounted Doug notifying him of Venus's disappearance.
He was like, Ricky, she's missing. I'm like, what, dude? Because he was telling me, like, she does weird stuff, like weird stunts.
Ricky had already lied during this interview, so the detectives were hesitant to believe anything that he said. To increase the pressure, they proceeded to lay their cards on the table.
I'll be blunt. Doug Stewart abducted and killed his wife. Okay. We also know that somebody went into a legal office down there in Newport News, Virginia, to pay a legal bill for him. We also know that you were down in that apartment.
Yeah, I wasn't. Wait, for what?
On the 25th of April. And the 26th.
Of April? No, that was only on spring break.
Ricky would not admit to being in Virginia at the time of the disappearance. He also made it clear that after learning the public details of the investigation, he had distanced himself from his virtual pal, Doug.
I Googled his name again, and I saw some weird like, they found like a receipt or something from a different state, close to Michigan, and I was like, what the? And at that point, I was like, I'm not talking to this guy, that's weird.
The detectives played to Ricky's emotions, showing sympathy and support for him in the high-stress situation that he had found himself in.
You're probably thinking, wow, am I going to get in trouble for this? What am I going to do? I didn't know any of this was going to happen. You know what I'm saying?
That's
It is, I know. And I don't think you were involved in the planning of that. I think it was more him. And you just kind of got caught up in something. You realized after the fact, whoa, this is way over my head. I don't want any part of doing this anymore. You got a couple sisters, right? Okay. What if this happened to your sister? You close with them?
Yeah, I'm pretty close with them.
What if somebody took your sister?
Be upset.
You'd be upset, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
This is what's going on with Venus's family. They're right now going, we need closure to this. We really do. You need to help us with that. Because you are part of this game now, but not our main concern whatsoever.
And like Shane said, if we thought that you were a main player in this, do you really think we'd be dealing with you like this? Absolutely not. So my first question to you is, did he tell you he was going to kill her before this happened, before you went down there? What did he say?
He didn't take care of business up in Michigan.
What was the business he said he needed to take care of?
Go see his wife.
Okay. Did he say why?
To hide her.
To hide her?
To get rid of her.
Ricky finally opened up to the detectives and admitted everything. Doug was currently staying with his parents in Michigan for his ongoing custody battle. So following this interview, police tracked him down and arrested him outside of Thrasher's pit stop.
Here in Fulton, where everyone seems to know everyone else, Doug Stewart's arrest has sent shockwaves through his small hometown, especially for those who have known Doug's family for years. Mike Ducat goes back 20 years with Doug Stewart's family and doesn't think Doug did it. He saw Doug's father just this morning.
I imagine it's hard on him seeing this happen. But he's strong. He's a strong individual, and he'll get through this too.
But Doug's parents are not sharing their feelings with our cameras.
I'm sorry, you're trespassing. We've got it posted. Thank you for coming. We have no comment.
All I heard happened was that he came into town and went over to the store to shop. And then the police swarmed him in the store and slapped the cuffs on him and dragged him away. There was no incident at all. You know, he was, like I said, very cooperative.
Although Venus was still technically a missing person, police declared her dead and charged Doug with the first-degree murder of his wife.
What'll happen will happen. You know, we can only hope that truth wins out. That's all we can hope for. It's easy to make accusations. It's tougher to prove them.
Shortly after this arrest, about 50 people attended a vigil that was held for Venus.
We come together to honor Venus and her family. Such a beautiful young woman, a mother, a daughter, a granddaughter, a sister, an aunt, a niece, a cousin, and a friend.
With candles and heavy hearts.
At a time like this, it's impossible to understand why, isn't it? I mean, you just can't understand why these things happen.
Wearing purple and blue ribbons in honor of domestic and child abuse victims, friends and family of Venus Stewart joined together Sunday to pray for the missing mother of two and her family left behind.
It just felt awesome that the community was here to support us and how much they loved and cared for us and our family.
About 8 months later, in February of 2011, Doug's trial began.
People of the state of Michigan versus Douglas Stewart.
Even while facing life in prison, Doug remained cool, calm, and collected in the courtroom. The prosecution's opening statement outlined the abundance of evidence that they would present throughout the trial. They were certain that Doug had killed Venus, and were convinced that by the end of the trial, the jury would be confident as well.
Douglas Stewart caused the death of Venus Stewart.
Doug's defense team refuted this sentiment, saying that with no eyewitness placing Doug in Michigan, no body, and nothing else to prove that Venus was dead, the idea that Doug had killed her was merely speculation.
Guesswork. If you think about anything in this case, I want you to think about the word guesswork. I believe at the end of this case, the prosecutor is going to ask you to guess.
Once the opening statements wrapped up, the prosecution began by calling several key players to the stand, starting with Michigan State Police Trooper Aaron Steensma. Steensma described his first observations upon arriving at the scene and the distressed parents that awaited him.
I pulled in the driveway and I was met by a female who was hysterical and crying.
And what did you do next?
She told me that he took her.
Speaking of Venus's parents, they were next up to testify. The prosecution aimed to show the jury that they were caring and stable individuals who raised their daughter to be a good mother herself.
Was it odd that your daughter would have left her children alone?
It was more than odd. It was something that would not happen.
Following Larry's testimony, prosecutors called a security guard from the Van Wert Walmart to help introduce the surveillance footage as evidence. In this footage, Doug can be seen casually walking around in his eye-catching Hawaiian shorts, buying the same items that were on the receipt. The Walmart employee who had helped Doug that day, a woman named Donna Stifler, was also called to the stand to describe her encounter.
Most people weren't wearing shorts at that time. I said, "Welcome to Walmart, can I help you?" And the first thing I think he asked for was lime.
Not this lime, this lime. Covering a body with lime is well known to aid decomposition while covering up the horrible stench. Unfortunately for Doug, Walmart wasn't selling the lime that he was looking for, so he groaned in disappointment and went on with his shopping, ending back up at Donna's cash register minutes later.
Do you remember what that person bought?
A tarp, shiny shovel, silver, duct tape, gloves.
Do you see that person in the courtroom today?
Yeah.
Was that?
Yes.
Could you point him out and describe what he's wearing?
I'm so nervous. It's there.
What is he wearing?
A white vest.
This wasn't the only shady shopping that Doug did. This footage was obtained by investigators after finding a suspicious purchase from Doug's credit card transaction history. Before he left Michigan, he stopped by this store to buy a track phone. Track phones are prepaid wireless cell phones, or in other words, a throwaway phone. These devices are usually untraceable, unless a card is used to buy one. In this instance, a digital footprint is left behind, and the track phone's unique ID can be traced through GPS like any other phone. Detectives were able to track Doug's movements and place him less than 7 miles away from where Venus vanished around the time of the disappearance. If that wasn't enough, another thing tying him to this location was the fingerprint found on the plastic tarp wrapper, which did in fact belong to Doug. This evidence was damning to say the least, but the prosecution still had one more person to testify against Doug. Their star witness, Ricky Spencer.
Please call your next witness and we'll have him sworn in.
You call Ricky Spencer.
You swear to tell the truth?
Yeah, I swear.
How do you know Mr. Stewart?
I met him on Xbox Live, December of 2008.
How often did you play Xbox Live with Mr. Stewart?
Anywhere from 6 to 10 hours.
A day?
Yeah, on a daily basis.
Yeah. Would you say he was your best friend?
Yes. He called us brothers from another mother. Brothers from another mother.
When spring break was on the horizon, Doug made a proposition. He suggested that Ricky should spend his spring break in Virginia at Doug's apartment.
We can party, you can drink, and I can help you with your papers.
Ricky went on to describe his trip. For the first few days, everything was normal. They went to Busch Gardens, drank alcohol, and played video games. But on the fourth day, Doug's true intentions were revealed.
He's like, hey, Ricky, I want to tell you something. It's really important. Let me finish before you interrupt me.
Doug confided in Ricky about his rocky relationship with Venus. He characterized her as an abusive mother that jeopardized the well-being of their children. Something drastic had to be done.
And he was telling me that he was going to go kill his wife.
When he was telling you this, what were you thinking?
I was just shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Okay.
He said, this is where I want you to come in, Ricky. I want you to be my alibi. Just pretend to be me and live in my apartment. I was like, no, dude, I don't want to hear anything about this. And he didn't talk about it for the rest of the day.
When Ricky declined, Doug seemed to take no for an answer and dropped it for the time being. But over the next few days, Doug fed Ricky bits of information implying that Venus was a liability that had to be dealt with.
How did that make you feel?
I felt bad for him. He was saying, if only, someone could be my alibi. I'm like, no, dude, I can't do this.
Although Ricky said no, Doug was persistent. He then won Ricky over by telling a story in which Venus had apparently tried choking one of their daughters.
Ricky, if I wasn't there at that moment, the kid might have died.
He again asked you to help him kill his wife?
Yes.
And what did you say?
I said, okay, dude, I'll be your alibi.
Once Ricky agreed, Doug took him to a nearby park to discuss the do's and don'ts of murdering someone.
He asked me, Ricky, if you're trying to kill someone and you don't want any evidence, what do you use? And I told him, well, not a gun because it leaves evidence. And he says, right, not a gun, so what is it? Not a knife because that leaves evidence. And he says, right, not a knife, so what is it? Doug said, you choke somebody.
After a quick glance to make sure that nobody was watching, Doug placed Ricky in a military chokehold.
He puts me down, and I'm out of breath. He says that if you do that to somebody for 10 seconds, they pass out. You do it for over 30 seconds, they're no longer alive.
Over the remaining days of spring break, they fleshed out their game plan. Ricky then went back to Delaware to wait for Doug's signal, which came on April 15th, 2010. They met up at a gas station in Bethesda, Maryland, where Doug gave Ricky several items, including his clothing, cell phone, keys, and a credit card.
What's that a photograph of?
This is the parking space area where I met with Doug Stewart.
Where did you go?
I drove to Virginia.
Where did Doug tell you he was going?
To Michigan.
What was he going to do there?
He didn't say kill his wife, but he said to take care of business up in Michigan. Yeah. But I knew what he meant.
Ricky drove to Virginia, buying Wendy's with Doug's credit card along the way before arriving at Doug's apartment.
Why did he want you to use the credit card there?
To make it look like that he was in Virginia.
Unfortunately for Doug, his plan was foiled when he was pulled over on his way to Michigan for weaving lanes.
And he said, hey, dude, it's done. I killed her and her dad. I was like, wait, what? And he says, no, I'm just kidding. I told him that wasn't funny.
So he said he was kidding and you told him it wasn't funny?
Yeah. And he said, the plan's off, and I was relieved to hear it.
Despite this hiccup, Doug was still laser focused on his goal and made that clear to Ricky.
Hey, Ricky, I want to try doing this again. I told him I didn't want to. It was like a one-time deal, and I didn't want to do it the first time.
In response to Ricky's reluctance, Doug upped the ante. He said that if he couldn't do it discreetly with Ricky's help, he would have no choice but to do it in a more straightforward manner.
He was talking about going in there and killing anyone that was inside the house, besides his kids.
So what did you do next?
I told him, okay, dude, we'll do it again. I'll be your alibi again.
The second attempt began on April 25th, 2010. This time, Ricky called into Doug's work pretending to be a sick Doug.
And I said in a sick voice, like, hey, Bobby, this is me, Doug. I'm feeling like, dude, I can't get into work. He said, all right. So Doug didn't have to come to work on Monday.
At 7 a.m. the next morning, after arriving at Venus's parents' house, Doug called Ricky using the track phone and said,
Ricky, I want you to leave anywhere from 8 to 8:15. Nothing later.
Following this phone call, Ricky left during his instructed time slot, disguised as Doug.
Do you recognize that photograph?
It's me leaving the apartments on the 26th.
Ricky then went to Wilson & Wilson to make the legal payment.
Just hand her the envelope, say who you are, and tell them that you're in a hurry, and tell them to mail you the receipt.
Did you do that?
Yes.
Then, around 9 a.m., Ricky received another phone call from Doug.
He said, okay, dude, it's done. I was kind of shocked to hear that. I said, what happened? He said that he called Venus's parents' house in Michigan and said that he was the mailman. He had a package for her, and she came outside, and he jumped out, and he said that there was a scream. She screamed once, and that she tried putting up a fight, but he was able to get in that headlock, and a drop of blood came from her nose. I asked him if it was worth it. He said it was, to protect his kids and give them some type of future. He told me that he was going to call me later because he was going to go to bury her.
Following this phone call, Doug and Ricky met back up at their secret meeting spot in Bethesda, Maryland, where Ricky had a sudden and scary realization.
I was asking him, hey, dude, are you going to kill me? And he said, no. I said, good, because if you did, that would suck. And then he asked, why did I ask that? And I says, because I know what you did.
Fortunately for Ricky, Doug's bloodlust seemed to begin and end with Venus. But, unfortunately for Doug, Ricky living to tell the tale might be his downfall. The defense would now have to pull out all of the stops in an attempt to discredit Ricky as a key witness.
Ricky, your gamer tag is Dark Boop, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
What's a boop?
It means a bunch of guys.
On top of revealing this inappropriate username, they also implied that Ricky was a liar, citing that he lied to his parents about his friendship with Doug and his spring break plans.
Did you want them to know that you were going to visit Mr. Stewart?
No.
Why?
Because it seemed kind of strange to go meet up with somebody that you played Xbox Live with who's a lot older than you.
Basically, the defense wanted the jury to see how inconsistent Ricky really was. They hoped to plant the seed that Ricky was a perverted, compulsive liar who made up a story and now needed to save his own skin. To back up this claim, they also reminded the jury that Ricky only testified because he made a plea deal with the prosecution. This deal dropped his charge of conspiracy to commit murder to a lesser charge of conspiracy to commit manslaughter.
Thank you. That's all I have here.
With no witnesses called by the defense, it was now time for the closing arguments.
Defense rests, and we're ready for closing argument.
The prosecution felt that the evidence spoke for itself and reiterated the main points of their case. On the other hand, the defense claimed that the prosecution was lacking the right evidence to prove Doug killed Venus. They reminded the jury that without a body, there was, without question, reasonable doubt, and that Doug should be found not guilty.
What evidence of that kind, in this case, do you have to demonstrate to you that Venus Stewart is dead.
They argued that if Doug was about to commit a murder, why would he walk around the Van Wert Walmart in high-key Hawaiian shorts, asking for assistance from Walmart employees?
Is he trying to hide things? He's wearing Hawaiian shorts, asking people where things are. Does that sound like somebody who's going to use it in a crime? What evidence have they shown you that a shovel was used in the killing of Venus Stewart? They haven't. They've tried to make you think they have all this evidence, but they don't. And they haven't proved their case. And you have a duty to do. And that's to find Doug Stewart not guilty.
Following a hard-fought legal battle, it was time for jury deliberations.
On the record, the People versus Stewart, the jurors indicated they've reached a verdict.
On March 11th, 2011, after only 3 hours, the jury found Doug Stewart guilty of first-degree murder, premeditated murder, and conspiracy to commit first-degree premeditated murder. At his sentencing, Doug continued to maintain his innocence.
I'm innocent. I did not do these crimes.
Regardless of what Doug wanted the court to believe, his conviction was set in stone, and the judge did not go easy on his sentencing.
I'm sentencing the defendant to life in the Michigan Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole.
After receiving his sentence, he was escorted to the Saginaw Correctional Facility to serve his time. Ricky, who pled guilty to the lesser charge of conspiracy to commit manslaughter, was sentenced to 1 year in county jail.
Authorities say that he helped Doug Stewart kill his wife. This afternoon, Ricky Spencer was sentenced for his crime.
Today's sentencing actually ended with one of Venus Stewart's family members yelling at Ricky Spencer as he walked out of the courtroom, asking Spencer if he would come help them search for Venus Stewart's body. Just gives you an idea of how emotional it was here in the courthouse all day. Ricky Spencer spoke actually before he was sentenced. He was choking back tears. He said that this is a nightmare that he can't wake up from. And Venus Stewart's mom, Teresa McComb, also spoke to the judge before Spencer was sentenced. Venus Stewart's family wanted him to get more time in jail than the prosecution's deal that they agreed to, which is no more than a year in county jail.
Despite these sentences, there was still another chapter of this case that was unresolved.
We're just going to keep looking. I know she's out there somewhere, buried. I just hope he would tell us, but I don't think he's going to give up that power.
Not long after Doug's trial, the search for Venus's body was back in full swing.
Going off of cell phone calls Doug Stewart made around the time his wife disappeared, searchers tell us they're focusing their efforts on this circle, a 5-mile radius in Kalamazoo County. But there's still a lot of land to cover, so they've been putting signs up in this area looking for help. But
somebody has been taking them down a couple hours after we put them up. That's why we've been up there three weekends in a row. Why would somebody now take the posters down? We don't understand. We're very confused.
Confused, but willing to continue, they say, until they find what they're looking for.
The community was perplexed as to who would want to take down Venus's missing posters, until they caught the ones responsible red-handed.
Why are you taking those down? Give them back to me. Give them back.
I wanted to tell you, we saw Doug. He's doing great.
Murdering.
Is better in his life.
Oh, in prison? It does good for him, huh?
He's really sorry about what's happening with the posters, and he hopes you find her.
Oh, that was good.
He did. He said he hopes you find her. And you know what? He said you should actually be putting the pressure on Ricky if you want to find anything.
We went to Doug Stewart's parents' house to ask them what's going on, and for the first time, they broke their silence about the case, their son, and those signs.
Sure, they put up nasty letters, so we took them all down.
The Stewarts gave us some of the signs they admit they tore down. There's no law in St. Joseph County about putting up or taking down signs like these. The Stewarts told us they don't object to the search for Venus, but do have a problem with what else is on some of those signs.
We told them, I said, if I knew for a fact that she was dead, I'd be more than willing to go out and help them look or do anything. But I said, where do you want us to look? What do you want us to do?
The Stewarts told us they still can't believe their son was found guilty.
I can't see him doing something like this, too. I don't know how he can do something like this, but he loved her dearly.
But after a trial and conviction, Venus Stewart's family says that's ridiculous.
There's no doubt at all in the back of your mind that, Venus isn't, in Texas somewhere, or just that she didn't just run away?
No, she wouldn't leave those kids for 2 hours, let alone this long. She would never put her mother through this, or her father. Never. Not a doubt in my mind.
Although this family feud was throwing a wrench in the gears, it would take more than a couple of defensive parents to stop the community's search efforts. 7 years passed with no notable progress in finding Venus. Tragically, Larry McComb, Venus's father, died from cancer during this time. Throughout the year of Larry's death, detectives continued to visit Doug in prison. And on one of these routine visits, Doug's demeanor completely changed. He was asked if he was finally ready to come clean, and he responded by saying that hypothetically, he could take the detectives to Venus's body. But he had a list of demands for his cooperation. Among those demands were certain perks, including being able to teach in prison, joining the K-9 program, and being able to attend his parents' funerals in the future. Oh, and one more thing. An Xbox. The proper authorities agreed to most of these demands, including the Xbox, so a satisfied Doug was now willing to cooperate. Doug led the authorities to the exact location of her body. He wrapped her up in a tarp and buried her in a wooded area just miles from her parents' home.
It's deep in these woods where Doug Stewart says he buried his wife's body after murdering her 8 years ago.
Why do you think right here? Because I put a bunch of fallen stumps right here. And that tree looks really cool. It's either there or there.
Okay. He explains with little outward emotion how he picked this location to hide his wife's body. Doug Stewart led police down a 2-track about 20 miles southeast of Kalamazoo. It was 12 miles north of where Venus Stewart was last seen alive. Police later confirmed the remains are those of Venus Stewart.
I mean, it's got to be right here. Yeah. Okay. It's got to be.
While out in the field, Doug sat down for a news interview where he spared no details.
This was single-handedly the worst thing that I could and will ever do in my entire life. I loved her. I couldn't handle it. It got to the point where I thought I was never going to see my children again. I just couldn't see another way out. I can't understand my mindset back then. It was almost like I was on a mission. I did lie in wait. She did come out. I did put her in a choke maneuver. She passed out. I sat there for minute, maybe two, staring at my best friend, passed out in my lap. I didn't have a plan.
Although Doug says he had no plan, he had already plotted her murder and found a plot of dirt in a very remote field to bury her body. And that's where Venus met her demise.
I batted her arms down. She saw it coming, and I batted them down with my right hand, and I struck her with my left. She didn't hit the ground before I started apologizing, and I almost threw up. There was so much blood. She didn't say anything. She collapsed down to the ground. 20 seconds later, her eyes closed. I didn't know what to do. I can't believe I did what I did. I will never forgive myself.
Over 8 years after Venus's death, she was finally given a proper funeral, buried next to her father. Although this provided some closure, it is likely that those who were close to Venus will never fully heal. As for Doug, he now resides at the Saginaw Correctional Facility and is only allowed to play offline sports games on his Xbox for 30 minutes per day.